Now, I know this is going to sound cheesy and like someone paid me to say this, but Austen opera truly is my favorite thing about Austen. Which must mean I don't know Austen very well, I'm guessing. But truly, when I was here for Traviata, yes, I enjoyed eating out and doing different things and meeting different people and sort of getting a hint of the Austen vibe, which is great. But truthfully, this opera company really is just it's a joy to work here. Everyone here has a smile on their face and they've got purpose in their step, and I love coming to Austen specifically because of the opera.
Awesome.
Bang! Woo! That is not even that's not even a debatable question, I don't think. There's a universality and importance in barbecue that cannot be matched by a mere taco. I grew up in the South Carolina and Virginia, and the greater South, where barbecue is right there with the Constitution in terms of importance. Tacos have their place, but barbecue, if it's good barbecue, there's just no comparison, really. So I'm a little offended you asked the question. I know that there are some people that love tacos. I'm fine with tacos, but barbecue is way up there, way. Well, I'm glad that I don't have to conduct just one opera, but I would have to say that Otello, the reason I'm here right now, I don't have an opera that I love more than Otello. There are a couple other operas that I also adore. Marriage of Figaro, of course, Electra of Strauss, and so many other great operas. But the great thing about Otello is that there is so much there in every single bar that one could never wring out all of the substance in its entirety. I could be very happy conducting Otello for the rest of my life, truly. I love conducting Verdi because Verdi, unlike any other composer of 19th century Italian opera, he is the one that most fully realized the dramatic potential of opera as a communicative art form. He sensed and replicated the drama inherent in the story in such a way that the music completely enlivens the story. There are other great 19th century Italian opera composers, Bellini, Donizetti, and of course we get into Puccini at the end of the century, going into the 20th century. But Verdi is the one who I think has the greatest depth, and the way he grew stylistically. Early Verdi is marvelous in its own naive kind of way. Middle Verdi is absolute perfection. Rigoletto, there's no piece of 19th century middle Italian opera that's greater than Rigoletto, and of course Traviata is also great. But by the time we get to late Verdi, the style has changed so very, very much from Otello and Falstaff from what it was in earlier manifestations of Verdi's style, but it's still distinctly Verdi. It's just so amazing. And so I absolutely adore conducting Verdi. He's not my only composer that I love to conduct, but conducting the great masterpieces of this great master is a true privilege. I agree with George Bernard Shaw. You know, he makes these kinds of comments at an attempt, and usually quite successfully, at being humorous with truth. But I agree in this particular case. One of the things that I think is so great about Otello, the opera, is that in a way that musically his earlier operas were so identified very specifically as Italian style operas, with the accompanimental figures, that could be nothing but Italian opera. Otello is much more universal. It still sounds entirely like Verdi. It couldn't be anybody but Verdi. But because the style, from a formal standpoint, we don't have aria after duet after ensemble, where we're interrupting things with applause and all of that. It's much more integrated in a symphonic kind of way. That it becomes we sort of are able to take ourselves out of an awareness of being in the middle of an Italian style opera. What's interesting to me, Macbeth, which is Verdi's first Shakespearean opera. And of course, Macbeth takes place in Scotland. Well, so Macbeth was written in 1847. He revised it in 1865. But we have this, we all know the story of Macbeth. We all know the atmosphere, this brooding, gray, misty, Scottish kind of atmosphere in the play. And then we have in Verdi's music this brilliant Mediterranean Italian opera kind of thing. And it's great. I love conducting Verdi. But it takes a little bit of adjustment to hear. There's this party scene where the music is so clearly incredibly vibrant Italian music while we're in this Scottish castle. And that phenomenon does not exist in Otello. Otello, really, the atmosphere is got much more universal application. So we go right to the heart of the drama. We go right to the heart of the meaning and the profundity of the text and of the story, and we're not distracted by any of the devices that are common in what we come to know as Italian opera, 19th century Italian opera style. So I agree with George Bernard Shaw. There's not a specific time when I can remember thinking, I'm going to be a conductor, because it never dawned on me that I couldn't be a conductor. I thought I could be anything I wanted to be musically. I was very fortunate. Both my parents were musicians. My father taught me piano. My mother was a singer. My father was also a musicologist, which in a certain sense was more important to my development than even my studying of the piano, because as a musicologist, from my very earliest years, he was playing for me great music of all kinds, whether piano sonatas or symphonic music or operatic music. And I didn't know there was a difference between any of it. I just thought it was all great music and I wanted to involve myself with it as much as possible. So my earliest musical manifestations were piano and violin. I studied violin, and then my voice changed and I found out that I could sing, and it was so much easier, I thought, than having to practice. So I wanted to be all of those things. I wanted to be an opera singer, I wanted to be a violinist, I wanted to be a pianist, and I also wanted to be a conductor, but I had no idea about how to go about it. So that's an answer to another question that would take a long time to explain. How does one become a conductor? For me, and everyone's path is different, but for me it was sort of the broad approach to music generally that I was able to receive and take advantage of, really sort of taking an early love in all manifestations of great music. Doesn't mean I was smarter than anybody else. It's just that I was really blessed to be exposed to great music at an early age. So that I have decided in the last few decades of my life that the best way, the most meaningful way for me to channel my love for all kinds of great music is as a conductor. So there was no specific time. I do remember the time when I was first aware that, I actually am a conductor. I had been throwing myself out there as a conductor and doing some conducting. And then I got called in to do a step-in performance. A conductor couldn't do a performance of Madame Butterfly, which is a fairly complicated piece of music. And I was on one side of the country, and I was flown in first class because that was all that was available. And I came in, I did this performance and survived. And I remember on the flight back, I started to think to myself, well, I just jumped in and conducted a performance of Madame Butterfly that went well. I must be a conductor. I remember very distinctly the fact that was the point when I realized that I was a conductor, and I realized that I could give myself permission to call myself a conductor, because I think conducting is the greatest privilege there is as a musician. I wish more conductors would sort of give off that vibe, if you will, but recognize the privilege that conducting is. Commensurate with that privilege is the responsibility. The conducting is something that I take very, very seriously. It means everything in this world to me, and I don't take it for granted. But I do love it with every ounce of my being, particularly when you get to work with great people and great music. My goal as a conductor is not, I want to conduct at this particular opera house or this particular orchestra. My goal has always been, I want to work with the best music and with the best people. And by the best, I don't necessarily mean the most famous, but just people who are of an equal mind into accomplishing what the goals of the composer, what the emotional content of the piece is, and to do it for the right reasons, realizing that we are servants of something larger than ourselves. You find that in places like right here, Austin Opera. I find that to be entirely the way the company, from the orchestra to the administration to everyone involved, the guest singers, that really is what speaks to me about this opera company, is that everyone's on the same page with humility and confidence at the same time, that we are serving the community with something greater than ourselves, and we believe in what we do so very, very much that we just cannot wait to share this with everybody, because we know how much it means to us. We know it can mean the same to you. Our performance of Otello is something that we're calling a festive staged concert. And I don't want this to be off-putting to anybody. I love this kind of performance situation. You know, we go to operas and we love lavish sets and costumes. That's great. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, that's what opera is in part. Opera is also something that folks don't often get to see, and that is the part that I'm so very much involved with, and that is the orchestral, the orchestral part. What in a piece like Otello, the orchestra is such a vibrant and quintessential, indispensable component of the drama. So for our performances here, the orchestra is going to be on stage, and when the opera opens up with The Storm, for example. The orchestra really is that storm, and not only do we see it and feel it, we almost in a tactile kind of way we see these folks making that sound that is the lifeblood of this piece. Otello lends itself specifically to this kind of performance, largely because of the fact that I mentioned earlier that the orchestra is not just an accompanimental aspect. The orchestra isn't merely accompanying with a succession of eighth notes the melodic line. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's wonderful. But the orchestra is absolutely incredibly vibrant. There's a moment in Act 3 when Otello is just absolutely in dismay over the idea that the one thing in his life that means the most to him. He's talking to God. He says, "You could have taken away all of my glory. You could have taken away anything, but to take away Desdemona, to take away my love, is just more than I can handle." The orchestra is playing this unbelievable music, and he is just making these statements, non-melodic, almost just talking. That's unique to Otello. It's also a way that I think allows the totality in a vertical kind of way. When I say vertical, I'm talking from top to bottom. I'm talking about from the orchestra to the chorus to the singers, all of it to be present, right there, the entirety of the document, everything that Verdi and Boito, the librettist, wants us to see, and Shakespeare. It's all right there. And it's a way to connect with our psyche and our emotions that that I think is unique and different than the standard way of seeing an opera. And there's nothing wrong with the standard way of seeing opera. That's what we live for. This is a peek behind the curtain, or I should say into the pit, that I think is going to be exciting to people who haven't experienced opera in this way. And because Otello it has such depth and integrity as a piece of music and as a piece of drama, I think it's ideal for this kind of interpretation.